Hey everyone, it's been a little while since I posted a video. This isn't a ranking one. This is kind of similar to the Johnny Cash overview that I did, except for we're focusing on one artist and one specific album. I'm recording this on the evening of September 23rd, 2021, 50 years to the day from everything that I've seen and read, and there are celebrations going on. 50 years ago, on September 23rd, 1971, an album came out that would go on to change the way we heard singer-songwriter music, the way we heard even country music, folk music. The list of songs on here, this one particular album, were completely revolutionary, even though they were so very much rooted in tradition and rooted in the great singer-songwriters who came before this. I'm talking, of course, about the self-titled debut album, John Prine. And you look at young, handsome Johnny, kind of decked out to be a country bumpkin on here, sitting in hay bales. As probably everybody watching this video knows, he was born in Maywood, Illinois, but his parents and his family were from Muhlenberg County in Kentucky, not too far from where Bill Monroe grew up. Bob Dylan said, and I'm probably going to slaughter this, but it was something to the effect of Prine's songs were Midwest mind trips to the nth degree. And being from the Midwest myself, from Michigan, just about 3 hours away from where Prine grew up, even though Prine was from my parents' generation, we had a lot in common as far as upbringing. His dad was a union factory guy, a tradesman, a tool and die setter. My dad was a plumber by trade. Grandpa was a carpenter was a song on a later album. My grandfather was a carpenter, and so a lot small towns, and a lot of Prine songs reach so many of us through the generations, and the songs, and I have to say, well, let me get back to it here. The songs have absolutely stood the test of time. The production on this is probably a little more country than what was really representative of John at the time. That's just me as a fan. I could be completely wrong. This could be, I actually don't know enough about the background of this. I know that, as is described on the back cover and the liner notes, he was playing the old town he was playing in Old Town, and it was which club? I can't remember. Anyway, and it's the end of a very long day. Anyway, so he was playing in Old Town in Chicago. His good friend Steve Goodman had been opening for Chris Christopherson and his band, and Goodman said, "Oh, if you like my songs, you got to come hear my friend." And they ended up going very, very late. John Prine was helping, clean out the ashtrays and sweep the floor and put the stools back up. Christopherson came in, heard the songs, made I think it was the Earl of Old Town, actually. And the rest is really history. There's not a lot more to say. Christopherson got Goodman and Prine the next week to New York City, and they came back to Chicago a couple of days later with record contracts. And Prine was on Atlantic Records, one of the biggest record companies, most important record companies in the history of the recording industry. So Prine's background, as many of you know, he was a mailman, the singing mailman, and we'll get to that in a little bit. He wrote most of these songs in his head on a mail route. He would scribble stuff in on note paper and on junk mail and stuff like that. He was only in his early 20s when this album came out, but he already sounded so wise beyond his years. He'd been in the army, he'd been over in Europe. He'd been writing songs for himself for quite a long time. And so just the lyrics on here, Prine was maybe even an accidental craftsman. He was so humble and so sweet from everything I've seen in the interviews about his creative process. He just wouldn't take credit for being so damn good, and he was. His songs were ridiculous. They were so great. And so this one opens. Side 1. Listen to the track listing here. Illegal Smile, Spanish Pipe Dream, Hello in There, Sam Stone, Paradise, and Pretty Good. All staples for his live shows for the remainder of his performing career. Illegal Smile, I tried to stare down a bowl of oatmeal, and it won. I mean, just talk about kind of a bummer of a morning, but he has an illegal smile, and it might be brought on by a little something illegal. You don't know. There's so much double entendre here. A bowl of oatmeal stared me down and won. And anyway, and then Spanish Pipe Dream about find yourself a beautiful woman, taking your kids out to the country, blow up your TV, feed them on peaches. You all find Jesus on your own. Hello in There is a beautiful ballad about having empathy for the elderly and the lonely. I should say too, the Oh Boy Records and John's family have started the Hello in There Foundation to help combat this. Kind of the coup de grace of side 1, Sam Stone, about a Vietnam vet who came back, and it's almost a Townes Van Zandt song. It's the only real sad song with no humor in it. And maybe other people see humor in it. I don't. I love the song, but it's not for the faint of heart, let me tell you. And then the autobiographical Paradise, which for decades then he closed his shows with. He would re-record a couple more times, some as duets, some in live settings, some, I think it was the German Afternoons album had it on, a more countrified version. Steve Goodman was on this one. Dave Prine, his little brother Dave, who ended up being huge, played fiddle on that song. If you're an Americana fan, you know the song Paradise. We're pretty good, we're all right. Great album, side 1 closer. Side 2, and this really, this speaks through generations here. Opens with a song called Your Flag Decal Won't Get You Into Heaven Anymore. He said that Reader's Digest used to send these flag decals out. It's a very sort of conservative publication in the early 70s, late 60s, and all of a sudden you saw them everywhere. But I think that it's a satirical look in a humorous way of saying, just because you act patriotic doesn't mean you really are. Far From Me, heart-wrenching. Angel from Montgomery, again, if you're an Americana fan, country rock fan, you know that Bonnie Raitt had a huge hit with that, and those two duetted on that beautiful song so many times. And what was unique is here's Prine as a young man in his early mid-20s writing from the point of view, I am an old woman, he had, even back then, he had just, I keep using the term empathy, he could put himself in the shoes of others so easily and write songs about them. It was a unique talent so few have had over the years. Quiet Man, I'm just a quiet man. It's one of the songs that I don't put on my playlists a whole lot. It's a good song. Every song on here is good. Donald and Lydia, talking about a pair of basically imaginary lovers. Donald's in the barracks. She's 5 miles away. I'm not going to say a whole lot about it. You have to listen to it. Use your imagination. You'll get it. 6 o'clock news and flashback blues close it out. Yeah, his voice was a little high on this, a little rough. He would refine it in the coming few albums and set the pattern for how he sounded. But again, this album, this should be in the Smithsonian. John Prine would be on a Mount Rushmore of American singer-songwriters. You might have a Texas Mount Rushmore and then, everybody else Mount Rushmore. I was going to show this real quick. It's, a CD pressing from the 80s. Sorry for the glare there. As with several other big, important albums in my life and in pop culture, I was not a huge fan of this album overall because, again, one, the production, it's not my favorite production of any John Prine album, even though the instruments don't overtake his songs by any stretch. But the CD transfer was just really not that good. Everybody in the 80s thought that this was the biggest thing in the world, but, you go back and you listen to the analog versions, or like this is the remaster, came out in the box set on Record Store Day last year, and you can now buy it on its own as well. Get yourself a good vinyl pressing of it, not a cheap vinyl pressing, although very few of those exist. If you can find an original, great. They're a lot of money if they're in good shape. Get the remastered one. It gave me a whole new appreciation once I sat and listened to this. I knew so many of the songs, but then when you hear a proper master, proper production, exactly how it was meant to be, you'll fall in love with it. And one last little sort of, if you would like an addendum or an addition perhaps, some years ago, let's see, 2011, so 10 years ago, The Singing Mailman Delivers. And this was put out on Oh Boy Records, and it was recorded August through November 1970. John who? John Prine. Live in studio work, dated 1970. You have from station WFMT in Chicago. In 1970, before this came out, John Prine did an interview, and he was allowed to put his songs down on tape. So many of the songs you hear on the debut album are here, as well as a couple that didn't get released right away or ever at all. And then there's a live show from November 1970, and you'll have to excuse me, I need to look and see if it no, it doesn't tell which club this was in, but anyway, it's a club recording of many of the songs again that would come out on the album. So you want to hear the genesis of John Prine, the album, and the songwriter. Pick yourself up this. Go to ohboyrecords.com. Do yourself a favor. Get this double CD. It's not out on vinyl record. Maybe one day. They're releasing a lot of his stuff on album now that wasn't originally. So I just wanted to touch on this because it's such a monumental anniversary. The album changed what would be Americana music. It always was, but when the genre was officially sort of labeled and marketed, that's one of the holy grail albums that you go back to. And so Prine's music has meant so much to me over the years, as it has many of you. So I don't know if I'll get this video up tonight yet, but definitely 50 years on, that album is still every bit as important, maybe more so than it was in 1971. So give it a spin. And drink a Handsome Johnny. Look up the recipe: vodka, ginger ale, and lemon or lime, depending on the season. And thank you all for listening. And here's to John Prine.